You're listening to episode 183 of The Secular Buddhist. Welcome to The Secular Buddhist. I'm Ted Meissner. The Secular Buddhist is the official podcast of the Secular Buddhist Association, a grassroots-driven effort to answer the needs of secular teaching and practice for contemporary society. The podcast has interviews and roundtable discussions pertaining to engaged Buddhist training and practice, and the SBA website has show notes for each episode along with resource materials. Though the podcast focuses on core practice from a secular viewpoint, more traditional teachings are welcome and openly discussed. Today we speak with Toni Bernhard about her new book, How to Wake Up, a Buddhist-Inspired Guide to Navigating Joy and Sorrow. Life is made of a wide variety of experiences. Some encourage and inspire, energize, and lighten us, while we may find other experiences discouraging or depressing. Our practice is getting to the heart of how to relate to what happens in life every day, but sometimes it helps to have a bit of guidance on that path. Toni Bernhard has been a long-time meditator, going on long meditation retreats and spending many hours rigorously practicing, but soon discovered that she simply could no longer engage in those difficult and taxing forms. She had to learn ways to make being sick the heart of her spiritual practice. And through truly learning how to be sick, she learned how, even with many physical and energetic limitations, to live a life of equanimity, compassion, and joy. She is the author of the award-winning How to Be Sick, a Buddhist-Inspired Guide for the Chronically Ill and Their Caregivers, and the newly released How to Wake Up, a Buddhist-Inspired Guide for Navigating Joy and Sorrow. So, sit back, relax, and have a nice pomegranate smoothie. Our guest today is Toni Bernhard. Toni, welcome back. Nice to speak with you again.
Thank you, Ted. I'm so glad to be here.
So we've spoken with you before about your book, How to Be Sick, and now you have a new book, How to Wake Up, a Buddhist-Inspired Guide to Navigating Joy and Sorrow. What's that about?
Well, How to Wake Up reflects my understanding of the Buddha's awakening. And it's one reason I called it Buddhist-Inspired, because I don't want to be purporting to speak for the Buddha. I want to make it clear this is my understanding based on many years of Buddhist study, over 20 by now. And by waking up, I'm referring to the insights that arose for him as he sat under the Bodhi tree for those, I think it was 6 or 7 days and nights. And my understanding is that he woke up to what it means to be a human being, both its stark realities and the potential it holds for all of us to find peace and well-being. And this is why I love being, I can think of myself as a follower of the Buddha, as opposed to belonging to any particular school, although my background is in Theravadan Buddhism. I read in all the traditions, and my writing draws from all of them. But one of the reason why I find the Buddha so helpful in my own life is that he was just a human being, an extraordinary one, of course, but a human being, just like me. So I trust him because his insights comport with what I see when I'm willing to seriously take a look around me, because sometimes what we see is difficult to live with. Constant impermanence and uncertainty and unpredictability and dukkha, which I think of as the tough times in life and the dissatisfactions we feel. And so I think about the insights that arose for him as he sat. One was what we refer to as the three characteristics of existence: impermanence and no self or no fixed self, which to me really is simply a corollary of impermanence. If nothing stays the same, that includes any sense of fixed, permanent identity. And of course, the difficulties that we'll face in life, the tough times, the suffering. But he also saw the potential for all of us to wake up in the midst of those difficulties to a life of peace and a life using particularly his Brahma-Vihara practices and mindfulness practices, a life where we're content even in the midst of those characteristics of existence that can be a challenge sometimes to live with.
Yeah, and you word that very well in the book itself. The thing that I liked best about reading it was that you took the sometimes abstract concepts that we have in traditional Buddhism and made them very pragmatic, very tangible, very reflective of what our experiences are here today. And he did that very well. Thank you for that.
Thanks. It seems to be the only way I know how to write, because I wrote my first book that way too. Whenever I talk about a concept, whether it be impermanence, I always think about, well, how does this apply in everyday life? And I always go to concrete examples, either from my own life or from anecdotes I've heard about other people or that they've told me. I actually make an effort in this book not to use a lot of Pali terms unless sometimes they're really necessary because there just isn't the right English word. But I'm trying to write in a way really that someone who has no background in Buddhism can follow. Yeah, it's the way I like to write.
Yeah. What prompted you to write this book and tackle this topic?
When I wrote How to Be Sick 3 years ago, which is also a Buddhist-inspired guide, I had absolutely no plans to write another book. I didn't really have plans to write How to Be Sick until it kind of poured out of me. I never thought of myself as an author in that way. And so How to Be Sick was let out into the world, and it's been 3 years now. And after about a year, I have this collection of, it's in the thousands now of emails from people from all over the world who have read the book, and they're writing to me, and they're asking me about all of the difficulties they're facing in life, not just about illness. And actually, some people are writing to me who are perfectly healthy, but maybe, someone gave them the book anyway and said, I think you might like this. And so I began to think about whether I could write another book that was broader in scope, even though there's still quite a bit about illness in the book because I write from my personal experience. I wanted to broaden the scope to look at all of the challenges that people face, from, trouble on the job to stress in relationships and, of course, loss of loved ones. And so really the emails, mostly emails, I did get a few letters actually, but mostly emails from people, that really was the impetus for me to start thinking about a second book. And I learned so much from writing it, because what it did was send me back to look at the Buddha's core teachings on concepts such as the 3 characteristics and the Brahma Viharas and basic mindfulness practices. Whereas in How to Be Sick, I pretty much was writing from my own, what I already had stored in my head from years of practice. With the new book, I really did some study, and I was amazed to rediscover really how grounded in everyday life the Buddha's teachings are. And I think when I saw that, that's when I thought, oh, I can write a second book because that's how I write. And I can fit those concepts and theories and insights of his into a book that talks about the challenges of everyday living.
So what do you hope readers will get out of it most?
Well, I hope they'll be encouraged, because I have, and I suppose this is an unconventional view, but I don't look upon awakening, and I'm just, you could call it liberation. I suppose you could even call it enlightenment, although that's a term I tend to avoid. But I don't look upon awakening, liberation, freedom, enlightenment. I don't look on it as this one-time deal where one day you're asleep and the next day you're awake. I see it as a potential that arises every moment. And the reason I see it that way is that that's how it seems to be for me in life, where in those moments when I'm immersed in my understanding of the Buddha's teachings and I'm acknowledging how I feel and accepting life as it is, even if it's not to my liking and my desires aren't being fulfilled, those moments when I'm okay with the way things are, I feel this peace and well-being that, to me, fits the description of how it was for the Buddha. But the next moment, I may just be overcome with, desire and envy and, But then, moments later, again, I have another chance at finding that peace, the contentment that I think of as the peace and contentment of the Buddha. And so you ask what I hope the reader gets out of it, is I hope that people see that the book is very practical. I actually counted 58 practices and exercises in it. I hope that people see that with practice and immersing themselves in some of these really simple, profound but simple insights of the Buddha, that every day there is the potential for feeling just the joy of being alive. And that when that goes away and everything looks dark and you're miserable and you think and you feel like a complete slave to your desires, you can even hold that lightly and with some measure of equanimity, knowing that it's not going to last because of impermanence, and that there will be moments in the future when you'll be able to access again that peace and well-being of the Buddha. So that's what I hope people get out of it.
You also have a blog called Turning Straw into Gold, and that's hosted on the website for Psychology Today. What's been the reader response to that?
Somebody contacted an editor there, and they invited me. It's been 2+ years that I've been writing. And I'm in the company mostly of therapists, which is interesting because I have no therapeutic training. And I sometimes have to make that very clear when I when I write, because I don't want anyone to think I am a therapist. So I'm in the company, not everyone there are therapists, but the majority of them are either therapists or they're on clinical psychology professors, that kind of thing. And I write mostly, I would say maybe 2/3 of my articles are on living well with chronic illness or chronic pain. And those really relate back to my first book, How to Be Sick. So I always bring a Buddhist perspective because that book was Buddhist-Inspired too, in the subtitle. So about 2/3 of them are about learning to live well with chronic illness. And then another third I write on Buddhism, and then sometimes I just write on something just because I want to write on it. I wrote an article about a month ago called 4 Misconceptions About the Bill of Rights because I just wanted to talk about how people misunderstand many of the provisions of the First Amendment. It was really just fun for me to write. A large majority of the people who read my stuff there do have health problems. And so when I write on health, the articles, I have a huge readership. When I write on the other subjects, not so big a readership. So it's kind of a balance that I'm trying to reach because I posted a piece yesterday called A Not To Do List for the Chronically Ill. But I always manage to, like I said, fit the Buddha's teachings in. So one of the not to do's is not to treat yourself unkindly. And I quote the Buddha saying, as he did, that if you search the whole world, you'll find no one more dear than yourself. Because there are some suttas in which he really indicates that until you are able to direct and evoke loving kindness and compassion for yourself, it's going to be difficult to do for other people. So it's always starting with yourself. So that was a piece I posted yesterday, and it's already, in less than 24 hours, 20,000 people have read it. Had I posted a piece on the Buddha talks about the 3 characteristics of existence, I would probably maybe have about 2,000 people by now. But that's okay because, reminds me of a great story that Larry Rosenberg once told, the insight meditation teacher. When he was a student of the Korean Zen master Sung San, they went off to teach a retreat. And they got there, and there were either, 1 or 2 people there. And Larry said to the master, well, what do we do now? And he said, we give the best retreat we can. So I know that it's not a numbers game, but it does amuse me that, and it's interesting to watch my own desires there. I have the desire for those 20,000 hits. So it's a good Dharma practice for me, actually, because do I write about what is in my heart, what's really moving me at the moment, or do I? And it's fine to write about health because the articles help people. It's not bad. It's just that sometimes I do have other interests. So it's been a great experience. I feel very fortunate to be on that website because I get a lot of readers just because I'm on that site. So I didn't have to do the work of starting my own blog and having only my kids and my husband read it. That's one of the jokes about blogs, that your mother reads it, right? And it's not a blog in the sense of a daily diary. I only post every 10 days or so. So they really are articles as opposed to today I got up and it was a good day, it was a bad day kind of thing.
You also have over 10,000 likes on your Facebook page, and you have some other web presences as well. So you really have 20,000 people who are following. So has this been gratifying to see your work resonating with so many people?
It has. I had no idea that this would happen, and it all is because of my first book, How to Be Sick. And it's partly that the book was so well received, but it's also that I'm sick. And so I'm doing this, talking to you now, I'm sitting on my bed. And so I can't go on book tours. I manage to get to a couple places near my home if they meet during the day. But in general, I'm mostly housebound. And so I realized 3 years ago that to get the word out about how to be sick, I thought, well, I'll just use the web. And my daughter said, well, you should start a Facebook page for the book. So I did that. And that has grown into this incredibly supportive and kind and loving community. And I would say maybe 20% of the people would self-identify as Buddhist. Most of them do not. Many of them are actually very involved in other religious traditions. But they come together and they like the fact that, well, I always say about the Buddha, I love the fact that he told it like it is. He didn't sugarcoat the experience of being human. He said we're in bodies, and bodies get sick and injured and old. And so when I talk to people on the website, respond to comments, I kind of take his perspective, which is to say to people, it's not your fault that you're having health problems, and to encourage them to be kind to themselves. And this really resonates with people because they live in a world where some people blame them for being sick, and other people are always saying, just think positively and everything will be fine. And they appreciate that I take a kind of start where you are, to quote Pema Chodron, that's not an original phrase of mine, start where you are position. Here you are, you have chronic pain or you have chronic illness. Now, what can you do to build a life of meaning and joy? And one of the things that's happened is that people send me a lot of private Facebook messages or private emails, because they can get my email address from my website, detailing all the problems in their life. So with this, it sounds wonderful to have 20,000 people as quote-unquote fans, but with it has come this feeling of responsibility that can become a bit of an overwhelming burden at times. I've had moments where I just don't, I'll be honest, I just don't want to read about another person's ongoing problems, either with their health or with family that doesn't understand or this or that, because I could get 20 emails like that a day. So I do what I can. I absolutely respond to everybody, much to the, my family doesn't think I should, but unless it's someone who's, I don't like to name call, but I'll say, unless it's a kook, I do get some kooky ones. But I do get around to responding to everyone, but there are some days I just can't do it because there's so much suffering. There's just so much suffering. And, there's this expression going around that it seems like half a dozen people take credit for or are given credit for, which is pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. Well, I like to say, and I suppose this comes from the subtitle of my book, Navigating Joy and Sorrow, I like to say sorrow is inevitable, suffering is optional, because the Buddha said there can be an end to suffering. Although people will say by suffering he was talking about old age, illness, and death, I have to wonder, because you can't put an end to those. So I put those under the category of sorrow. And life is going to have its share of sorrows. And suffering to me is what we bring upon ourselves by desiring what we can't have, by running after dreams that just aren't in our future, by not acknowledging impermanence and the fact that life will have its ups and downs. And so I do believe that we can put an end to suffering. But sorrow is something else. It's going to be there. And what makes a difference to how well we do in life in terms of feeling at peace is how we respond to those sorrows. Can we acknowledge them and treat ourselves kindly while they're present? You know, that's kind of the way I see the world. And when people write to me, I try to respond in that vein. I try to help them to see impermanence and the fact that, you know, the difficulties they're having today, that things may look a bit different tomorrow, and that in the meantime, I hope they treat themselves with compassion. And, well, I do go on. This is my job. It's turned out to be an online job that I had no idea. I didn't audition for it, but it's fallen upon me, and I feel a responsibility because they've read my work and then they reach out to me.
Part and parcel of the author's life.
Yeah, that's how it worked out for me. I don't know about other authors, but I suppose it depends what you're writing about.
Our guest today has been Toni Bernhard. You can find out more about her and her work on the newly revised and beautiful website, www.tonibernhard.com, which I will be linking on the episode page for this episode, so you can go to the site and see that. Toni, thank you very much for being here.
I've really enjoyed it, Ted. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to learn more about something you've heard in today's podcast, please come visit the SBA website at secularbuddhism.org, and you'll find an entire webpage devoted to this and every episode. Discussion about this episode can be found on the episode page itself, along with show notes. The music for The Secular Buddhist is used by permission from John Kaizan Neptune's CD, Steps in Time. Additional music is provided courtesy of Monty Levinson of Taihei Shakuhachi and Rodrigo Rodriguez. Their websites are also linked on the SBA site on the About Podcast Music page. Until next time, remember, every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can. See you next time on The Secular Buddhist.